Well, what do you think? Have you been enjoying yourself so far? I really have. Isn't this a great conference? Yeah. And my name is Scott Davis. I'm a principal engineer with ThoughtWorks, and I want to hold your applause, but I want to give another round of applause to all the organizers. In just a second, let me explain why. Because it's such a treat. I speak at so many conferences worldwide, and it's such a treat to work for a conference that values diversity and inclusivity. So let's give the organizers a round of applause for not making that second class. This is really important to me. I've been in the industry almost 30 years now. ThoughtWorks is a company that I'm really proud to be a part of. I'm local here. And I thought when I came to this conference, this would be the one time I wouldn't have to pack a suitcase and get on a plane to come to a show. Guess what? I'm working out of Dallas these days. So I had to pack a suitcase and get on an airplane to come to a show in my hometown. But that's because of ThoughtWorks. And I love to travel, and I love working for a company. After running my own consultancy locally here for over 10 years, Thirstyhead is my consultancy. As a matter of fact, that's where you can find these slides at thirstyhead.com. But what made me give up my consultancy after over a decade to work for another company is the fact that ThoughtWorks won the Grace Hopper Award last year. We're here to talk about a different kind of diversity. And I loved what you were saying as I was interrupting you coming up here. Because many times when you're looking at slides, they're text, aren't they? I like calling them bullet-riddled corpses because you have to read them. It's nothing but bullet. Sometimes you get images. And if you're really lucky, you get animated GIFs, right? But this diversity that I'm talking about right now will be including sound in my presentation. And not just canned sound. I'm not playing back MP3s. I'm going to have a conversation with my slide deck. And if you go out to thirstyhead.com, you can have a conversation with your slide deck as well. So let's dive in. How many of you have Alexa at home right now? Oh, do you love it? Oh, I love me some Alexa. There is nothing better than coming down in the morning first thing before I've had coffee and say, hey, Alexa, play me some Bob Marley. There's nothing finer than that. Now, it's not life-changing, but they're these little things that improve the quality of your life. They aren't life-changing, but they're life-enhancing. When I'm cooking with my daughter and we're up to our elbows in buttermilk biscuit or buttermilk pancake batter or things like that, it's such a joy being able to say, hey, Alexa, set a timer for 20 minutes. These are the tiny, incremental improvements that these kinds of devices are bringing to the party. Now, this was just announced yesterday. Amazon Dash. Did you hear about this? Yes, this is a voice integrated little device. Amazon is selling it for $20 and then giving you a $20 gift certificate. So what does that mean? These devices are now literally free. And they've been ubiquitous for quite some time, but once they're free, that's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? How many of you paid for web browsers back in the day? I'm still trying, I must be old. I'm still trying to get my $20 back from Netscape. They won't answer my calls, right? That was when web development was precious and special and unique. What happened when web browsers became free and ubiquitous? We're a dime a dozen now, aren't we? Right? The web is everywhere, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We are poised on the precipice of the same thing, only conversationally instead of visually. I call this the Internet of Conversational Things. Unfortunately, I'm the only one that calls it this. This is ridiculous. No one calls it this. But if it does happen to catch on, you heard it here first, right? But all these little devices in our lives right now, we can talk to, or they're listening to us, or both. And Gartner says this is not a blip, and not a mistake, and not an anomaly. This is absolutely a trend. By next year, Gartner estimates that over a third of our interactions are going to be happening with this thing instead of these meat sticks on the end of your wrists. And let me give you a real-world example. I bought a Roku over Christmas. And I've had a lot of Rokus. I love me some Rokus. I got Apple TVs, and I got Chromecasts and things, but the 10-foot UI on the Roku just really sings to me. And so I bought my brand new Roku, and I plugged it into the TV, and I pulled out the remote control, and I hit the search button. And instead of a keyboard popping up, where I have to laboriously type in one letter at a time, I get carpal tunnel disease, right? Just by trying to type in words on my TV remote. Well, when my Roku came out of the box this time, I hit the thing, and a little microphone came up, and they said, "Why don't you talk into your remote?" I said, "I didn't know I could." But that sounds delightful. Hold that up, and all of a sudden you say Breaking Bad, or you say, Game of Thrones, whatever you're looking for. And it is a time improvement, dramatic time improvement. I've got a watch, not one of them, they're Apple watches. I like watches that are non-denominational, and there are more and more of them coming out there. But I love being able to drive home from work and say, "Hey Siri, text Kim Davis," that's my wife. Siri says, "What would you like to say to Kim Davis?" "Tell her I'm going to be late for dinner, but I love her." And that all works until Ken Davis, not Kim Davis, but Ken Davis, a work colleague, a customer of mine that I hadn't talked to in 7 years, got the message. And he responded, he said, "Thanks, Scott, love you too." So it all worked out. It all worked out. These are early days, but these are exciting days. These are exciting days. I know this font is really small underneath the big hero text up there. "Hey Siri, what's the place for sushi in town?" This is what I mean by a conversational UI. We'll talk about chatbots briefly. And while that is a conversation, that is a typed conversation. I want to focus on spoken conversations. And this is what it says in the small text right below it. Talk to Siri as you would to a friend. You're not going to say to Siri, "Select asterisk from restaurants where city equals Denver and cuisine equals raw fish." It would make Apple's life so much easier. Do you think you would be willing to change to having a conversation like that? Probably not. We want to be conversational, natural language. And this is the real power of conversational UIs. Because we're all smart in here. We're programmers. We're not afraid to get down at a keyboard or be on a mouse or pinch or stretch or swipe or pull down. But how does your mother feel about that? How does your grandfather feel about that? Imagine a world where you won't walk into your kitchen and say, "Hey Siri, order me some Cap'n Crunch," but you say, "Hey Cortana, what were my doctor results from my appointment yesterday?" "Hey Cortana, explain to me what this kidney dialysis report means." "Hey Google, did I take my pills this morning?" We can start with the fun stuff that's not life-changing, but it is a baby step to life-changing functionality. And this is available to us now. And why I'm so excited about this is available to us not through proprietary interfaces, through open, standard-based interfaces. I'm a web developer, a long-time web developer. You know that already, right? And I have a strong feeling about standards. Anytime I start up a new team, I say, go standard or go home. And I mean that. I love the fact that Turing is represented here. Any students from Turing here? Good, love seeing you here. ThoughtWorks is at Galvanize over there on Platt Street. Any G School grads here? Oh, good, a couple, absolutely. I love these programs. There are lots of these boot camps around. They're very powerful. They're a great way for you to get up to speed very quickly. But what they focus on are frameworks, not fundamentals. And every time I talk to a student and they say, "What can I do to level up my skills? What do I do to become a senior developer or even a mid-level developer?" I say, stop learning frameworks and start learning standards. So I loved the web components presentation earlier today because that is baked into the browser. And these modern frameworks that are running on top of them, like Angular, like Polymer, are using core browser standards in order to give you the syntactic sugar you need to increase your developer velocity. What I'm going to show you here are not frameworks. What I'm going to show you here are open standards that are baked into every modern browser. Shall we begin? Let's do this thing. All right. So when did I start? Since you know, did you tweet when I started? No? All right. I'll just keep talking until I'm done. How about that? All right, war games. Now, let me ask a question that I do not want to know the answer to. War Games was a movie that came out in 1983. How many of you were not alive when War Games came out? I am so sorry I asked. Oh, my God. So I have a son. My kid's 15. He's a sophomore in high school. And when you get to be a parent, you know this is how you torture your kids. You show them the movies that were important to you when they're the same age. We showed him the original Batman. Not a fan. Not a fan at all. Once you see Heath Ledger at the Joker, you can't see any other Jokers, right? But we watched War Games, and he was a big fan. And that surprised me because the technology is incredibly dated. The fashions are ridiculously dated. The technology is right here today. So let me play you a brief, possibly illegal snippet.
We're in. It thinks I'm Falcon. Hello.
How can it ask you that?
It'll ask you whatever it's programmed to ask you. You want to hear it talk?
Yeah.
I'll ask it how it feels. I'm fine. How are you?
Excellent. It's been a long time. Can you explain the removal of your user account on June 23rd, 1973?
They must have told it he died. People sometimes make mistakes.
Yes, they do.
How can it talk?
It's not a real voice. This box just interprets signals from the computer and turns them into sound.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
I could watch that whole movie right now. Shall we? Do you want to put it to a vote? Think about what Matthew Broderick said at the very end. That wasn't Matthew Broderick's grandson, by the way. That was Matthew Broderick. Think about what he said. He says, the computer will say whatever you tell it to say. And when she asked, how is it speaking? He said, well, it's simple. It's just a voice synthesizer. It's just taking any text and converting it into sounds. This is easy. This is dead, stupid easy. This is 1983 easy. So this kind of technology is absolutely here and waiting for us to take advantage of it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There is a W3C set of standards, World Wide Web Consortium, called the Web Speech API. It's made up of two parts. It's made up of speech synthesis, which we just saw, text to speech, and it's also got speech recognition in it. That seems a little bit more like Siri and Alexa and Cortana. And by the way, what's Facebook's agent's name? Do you remember? Is it Lola? Facebook rolled out one. Everyone's got an agent these days, so yeah. So we're going to cover both of these. We're going to talk about both speech synthesis and speech recognition. And I am a coder. If you can't prove it in code, you can't prove it to me. So MDN, that's the Mozilla Developer Network, has a great set of examples out there. If you go out to GitHub, MDN web-speech-API, you can download JavaScript, Node.js code But this is all browser-based code, so you can download this and run this in your browser today. So, the speech synthesis API. This is Can I Use. How many of you have been to caniuse.com? Oh, yeah, I can't live without it, can you? Yeah. So when we look at this, this tells me that the speech synthesis API, green means good, right? And these are the current version at the main line, and then previous versions and future versions. You look at this, that is as universal support as you're going to get. IE doesn't support it, but of course IE doesn't support it, right? I tell you. But you know, Microsoft really deserves credit because Edge has outstanding support. And as a matter of fact, Edge has support for some of the more advanced APIs that the other browsers are lacking. Microsoft, when they got their new CEO, Satya Nadella, a couple years ago, he really changed things up. Edge is all open source now. Edge is standards compliant, crazy standards compliant, and they are actually taking the lead on a lot of this speech synthesis and recognition. So Edge deserves credit where credit is due. IE, not so much. So the problem with these APIs is they're so ridiculous complicated, no one could figure out how to use them, or maybe they could. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let me do my magic zoom in here. All right. So in order to use speech synthesis, and again, this works on every single modern browser out there, you new up a speech synthesis utterance, and then you speak it. Notice that you don't have to Bower install any libraries. This is core browser behavior.
Hello world. Hello world. Hello world.
I could do that all day long as well. What do you think?
Hello world.
I mean, yeah?
Hello world.
No, maybe not. That gets annoying after a while. All right. So that's the simplest example of this. But I like this. And by the way, that was straight out of that MDN example that I got you. That's not my code. That's stolen code right there. And this is stolen code as well. This is the more advanced version of that. Because what we can do now is not only have Alex say hello to us.
Hello world.
Hello, Alex. We now have a number of different voices. These voices are going to be browser specific, but the API that you use to get them are going to be consistent across all browsers. 0 polyfills required for this. So let's let...
Hello world.
Oh, hello, world.
Hello world.
That's Italian in an accent. One of my favorites is down here. Where are you at? Where are you at? My friend from India. There she is.
Hello world. Hello world.
And so what's interesting, as we're changing different voices, you can see they're speaking English with an Indian accent or an Italian accent or things like that. Since this is synthesized, you can create any accent you want. But if you use lang equals in those divs, and you can do that on a div by div or paragraph by paragraph or block by block value. If you said lang equals ES for Espanol, and then you had Alex try to speak it, he would speak Spanish with a terrible American accent. Kind of like I would as well, right? So the language attribute and the voice walk hand in hand. If you're going to be speaking Spanish, set the language to Spanish, and you'd most likely want to adjust your voice as well. How many of you laugh at your GPS when it doesn't know how to pronounce the street you live on? Yes, I love being asked to turn on Monaco. Monaco? That's what I said, Monaco. What? Yeah, so the speech synthesis is going to do its best to pronounce these words. But at the end of the day, it is simple text. So in order to level up a little bit, what you want to move from is plain text, which is easy and universal, to SSML, speech synthesis markup language. Now, it should sound a little bit to you like another markup language you're familiar with, right? Hypertext markup languages for building web pages in web browsers. SSML is for building voice apps in voice browsers. SSML is what you're going to use for Alexa. SSML is what you're going to use for IBM Watson. SSML is what you're going to use for a lot of the server-side resources. Client-side, the only browser that currently supports SSML is Microsoft Edge. Props to you, Microsoft team. Keep moving the needle in the right direction here. So this is what SSML looks like. What you start with is not HTML, you start with speak. Some of those elements look familiar to you, like paragraph elements. There is a line break carriage return at the end of a paragraph in HTML. There is a pause at the end of a paragraph in SSML. Paragraphs here are made up of sentences. Because we don't run together all our sentences, that would make it really hard to understand when I was starting and when I was stopping and changing subjects. Do you like sushi? So what we do is break sentences up and pause for effect, so we know when we're going to change the subject. That ice cream was so good. Thank you for serving it to us. These are the kinds of things that we can bake in through SSML that we can't through plain text. Notice that you would call it a BR in HTML. We call it a break here. So in this example, when we're speaking it, the first message is from Stephanie Williams and arrived at 3:45 p.m. In the previous example, we could change the pitch and the speed as well. In SSML, that's called prosody. And so what we're saying right now is, as this is turning around and reading the subject of Stephanie's email, by knocking the prosody rate down by 20%, it's going to come back and say the ski trip is, the subject is ski trip, and move on from there. I would love to demonstrate this to you, but I have the wrong operating system. I don't have a browser that supports SSML, so I can't demo it for you. But you can get so advanced. Everything that you can do programmatically with the JavaScript API, you can do declaratively inside of SSML. And make no mistake, this is what you're going to be using if you're doing Amazon Alexa or IBM Watson or the Microsoft Cloud Services or anything that's server-side. We're waiting for browsers to catch up. Once one implements it, the other browsers know they got some work to do. So this kind of support will be coming to us soon. But that's just speech synthesis. That was the easy stuff. What about speech recognition? That's where it gets fun, right? Oh, let's hop into the Wayback Machine.
Graduate research team in Guatemala, just checking in. Robert Jordan, a second semester junior, requesting a second extension on his term paper. And your mother reminding you about your father.
Surprise birthday party next Sunday.
Today you have a faculty lunch at 12 o'clock. You need to take Kathy to the airport by 2. You have a lecture at 4:15 on deforestation in the Amazon rainforest.
Right.
I think you get the idea here, right? This was 1987, and this is what Apple was talking about doing. Now, the difference between this and War Games is War Games was real, all right? That was a documentary. And this is pure fiction. But this was speculative fiction. This is what Apple thought, this was where Apple thought they wanted to go almost 30 years ago. And they got there with Siri, didn't they? Now, a couple of things should jump out at you. One of the things you should notice from that video is they thought you needed to have a little talking avatar. Do you remember the last talking avatar that we got on the computer? Hi, looks like you're trying to write a business letter, right? Didn't go over well. Clippy, good idea. Took one for the team, though, didn't you? Yeah. So what we've discovered, believe it or not, we are totally comfortable walking into a room with no one else there and talking into the void. That's our innovation right here, is we don't need to have a graphical representation. What does Siri look like? What does Cortana look like? What does Hey Google look like? I don't know, that joke doesn't sell there, does it? But we begin to see that we feel comfortable talking. And this is why I carry watches like this instead of Apple Watches. I want a device that forces me to use the voice UI, that doesn't fail over to text or graphics or things like that. That's why I'm so enamored of the Amazon Echo. There's no screen, there's no keyboard, there's no remote control. It's just you and your dulcimer pipes. And that's brave. But that is what we're talking about when it comes to conversational UIs. Now, Siri feels like she's been around forever. She's been around for 5 years. The iPhone's been around for 10. It's hard to believe that Siri's been around for half the time the phone's been around. I didn't use her until recently because it didn't make sense to reach into my pocket and unlock my phone and press and hold and then ask Siri to dial the phone number for me. That use case didn't quite work. You know what did work? Keeping my phone in my pocket and saying, hey Siri, call Kim Davis. Yeah? So the pure voice UI is what I think is brave and important and what we should be focusing on moving forward. Siri, interestingly enough, came out of SRI, the Stanford Research Institute. Any internet history buffs in here? Does SRI ring any names, ring any bells? Stanford Research Institute was where the internet was invented. It was one of the 4 original nodes on the internet. So it's really lovely that they have continued that level of innovation. Now, I left here for a while because Nuance is the organization, is the company that's providing the speech recognition capabilities for Siri. So even though Apple has not been really forthcoming with opening up these APIs, you could cut out the middle fruit and go straight to the source if you so wanted to. Now, the thing you will have to realize is that speech synthesis is stupid, easy, and it happens on device. Speech recognition, not so much. Speech recognition absolutely requires the cloud right now. Because if you think about it, I'm going to write pseudocode in your mind right now. Are you ready? How are you going to parse a sentence? Split on a space. All right, we're done. Any questions? It's so easy to synthesize text. How about speech? If I talk really fast like this, do you think it's going to be easy to figure out which words are? Your supercomputer does. These supercomputers, not so much. And how about if I act with an accent, right? Now, this is a nondescript accent. I don't know where this accent's from, right? But this is enough to screw up Alexa, even though you can understand me. So we've got some really devilishly hard problems to solve when it comes to speech recognition. Cloud-type problems. Intel is working on a silicon chip that you will have on your device that will give you that kind of speech recognition. As a matter of fact, we can do rudimentary speech recognition right now on devices. They're called wake words. Wake words. How do you wake up Alexa? You say, hey Alexa. She is listening for those 2 exact words. People get concerned that Alexa is listening to all your conversations and sending it up into the cloud. She doesn't want that. Amazon doesn't want that. That would kill your bandwidth and theirs. There's no way they would have the computing power to keep up with every spoken word. So what you do is you open the door and walk through it. And how you open the door is your wake word, and that has to happen locally on the device, doesn't it? Chicken and egg, right? So the device has rudimentary capabilities to hear wake words, and then once it wakes up, it captures what you're saying, uploads it to the cloud, processes it, and sends the results back down. You might have heard that the police subpoenaed Alexa. She was witness to a murder. Police didn't find anything. Alexa's no snitch. She's not going to give up, right? No, I hate blaming the victim, But in this case, I have to blank the victim because the victim didn't say, hey, Alexa, I'm getting stabbed right now. It looks like a 4-inch butter knife by a 6'4" perpetrator. If she would have said that, then we could have found the killer. Instead, a dozen steak knives showed up at their house, right? So that was a problem. That was a joke. All right. So wake words are important. Speech recognition can happen on device, but single words, very simple. You're going to need a round trip to the cloud, and if you don't want to use Nuance and Apple's solution, you can use Google's. They've got their own. They haven't named it as nearly as I can tell. They're the Hey Google company, right? So it makes sense that their cloud stuff doesn't have a name as well, but it's very powerful as well. They've got great source code examples up there. Notice this source code example is from 2013, a mere 5 years ago. But let's turn around and see what this looks like, all live and personal. So I'm going to click a microphone. That is the equivalent of my wake word right now. And then I'm going to speak into the mic, and let's see what happens here. A single malt scotch sounds pretty good right about now. There we go. How about a burger, too? Period. Thanks. Period. Goodbye. Not too shabby, huh? I write a lot of books, but I write it the old-fashioned way with my fingers. I've got a colleague who has written his last 4 books at his standing desk, completely spoken. Even the JavaScript. That's hardcore. Let name equal quote Scott quote semicolon new line. Not for me. Thank you, no. So, well, speech recognition works in any browser as long as it comes from Google, right? And why is Opera up there? Because Opera uses V8 under the hood, which is Google's JavaScript engine. Opera uses Blink. I had to wait for a second. I almost said WebKit. Uses Blink under the covers for their render kit. So actually, Opera and Chrome, same fizzy pop, 2 different cans. I like Opera a lot. So we have some work to do. However, knowing that Microsoft is so strong, I absolutely anticipate speech recognition coming to Edge sooner rather than later. Because Safari and Apple are really focusing on Siri, they used to open up these kinds of technologies in their web browser. They've stopped doing that recently, and it makes it hard for me. I'm an unapologetic Apple fanboy, and they make it hard sometimes. But I would anticipate that if they chose to do such a thing, they could open up the speech recognition API in their browser as well. Firefox is going to have a bit of an issue, aren't they? But they've gotten around this in the past. We know that in Firefox, you could turn around and point your search to Yahoo or Google or Bing or whatever you wanted. I would anticipate similar features coming up in something like Firefox. Which speech recognition in the cloud service would you like? Would you like to use Google's or Microsoft's or Apple's? So getting back to our source code once again, this is how hardcore the Mozilla folks are. By the way, they moved into ThoughtWorks' old offices at Galvanize, so I love me some Mozilla folks, some Mozillians. But their browser doesn't even support this, and they're still giving us source code to play around with. That's hardcore, isn't it? So we're going to use Mozilla's code in Chrome. My wake word is clicking on the big button in the middle, and if it works, I will be able to change the color only with the power of my voice. Let's see how it works. Red. Yeah! Oh, there it is. All right. Blue. Green. Goldenrod. Oh, it caught it. Usually when I'm a goof, it doesn't pick up goldenrod, but it returns the level of confidence it has that it understood what I was trying to say. So here's the source code as it looks. Notice that we're not doing natural language processing anymore. This isn't unbounded. We're creating a bounded grammar, and we're creating it in something called JSGF, JSpeech grammar format. And so what we're doing, these are our wake words now, although it's not waking the browser up, but this is the analogous technology that Alexa and those devices are using. They're not listening to any word, they're giving you a specific grammar. In our case, the specific grammar were the colors that corresponded to the Netscape color names from way back in the day. So it will only listen for those words. So if I come in here once again and say, cheeseburger, it received cheeseburger, but there's no cheeseburger color. Monkey, purple, green, blue, red, black. Or Nike. All right, we'll take that. I also confused it as well by giving it a whole bunch of different colors. You could solve that as a programmer, but the idea here is it will listen to some words and not the other. Our recognition start is our manual wake word, if you will. That's what makes it start listening. And then it will return the confidence level. This is much like geocoding in a browser. If you've ever said, show me all the Starbucks near me, when it returns those lists of Starbucks, or I should say Novo Coffee, right? All the Novo coffees near me, it's going to return the Novos with a confidence level that it heard you and understood you and is giving you what you're looking for. JSpeech grammar format. Have you noticed how old and stinky these are? Are you about ready to give me the hook? All right, I'm really close. So these formats are so cool. This is how you define this kind of grammar. And these slides are definitely on deck for you, online for you to check out. Alexa, very quickly, why I'm so excited about Alexa. She is based on these same standard technologies that I've shown you already. She has a great set of online source code you can play around with, Node.js. Go down and pull it down. A great step-by-step tutorial. Cold, I went through this 30 minutes and had my first Alexa skill programmed and published. So this is a great thing for you to play around with, but most importantly, you are going to be giving her utterances. You're going to be saying, I expect you to listen for, hey Alexa, ask Speak for a fact, or a space fact, or a tell me a fact, or tell me a space fact, or give me a fact. That is your bounded grammar right there. And then your response is coming back in SSML, isn't it? And this, for me, is a win. And this is why I got on my teeny tiny soapbox earlier, is that this isn't a framework, this is core technology. And when you learn core technology, it is pervasive across all of those frameworks. So that is how, as a junior developer, you level up to a middle or an advanced developer. You learn the fundamentals in those slow-running currents, because the fast-running currents are changing constantly. But the more you learn the low-running fundamentals, those currents can change all they want, and it's not going to bug you. So wrapping up, Alexa is so cool. It's minor life-changing stuff as we're using it right now, but it could be major life-changing because these conversational things aren't going away. 30% of our interactions are going to happen this way by next year. And if you do it in a standards-based way, you're going to be way ahead of the curve. I know I'm running late. If you will grant me 30 more seconds, because this is why this is so important to me. This is my daughter, Libby. She has Down syndrome, and Down syndrome is a spectrum of symptoms. In her case, her receptive language is perfect. She understands exactly what we're saying to her, but her speech is delayed. So this is a school project. This is her report at school.
Hi, my name is Jane Goodall. I was born in 1934 in England. I love animals, especially chimpanzees. I named the chimps, and one had a great chin. I named him Mr. Graybeard.
This report is something that Libby wrote by herself. It is her words being spoken by an assistive device. And that is what accessibility means. It's not called disability, it's called accessibility. And accessibility helps all of us. It helps me play my Bob Marley in the morning, helps my daughter get an A in class. Did you enjoy yourself? I did as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
I'm so glad you closed with accessibility, because that is what I've used like speech recognition for on the web. I always talk about like how crappy the two VRs are, virtual reality and voice recognition.
Oh, that's great. I haven't heard that. I like it. I'm going to steal that and use it on my own.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
And I'll give you credit.
That's fine. I'm used to it. I'm a woman. You know, like VR is something that's been around for a long time. Voice recognition has been around for a long time. I mean, the SSML spec was written like 2004.
Yes,
it's you know,
ancient.
It's ancient. You know, I feel like we're still at the time where it working well is an edge case, right? Like whenever I say to Alexa, like, "What's the weather in New York tomorrow?" and she tells me, I'm like,
it worked. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. But then most of the time she like misses the mark, you know.
Yeah.
And I always wonder if, and I know like VR development is a pretty like sort of it's kind of sexist because most of the people working on VR are men. And actually at the speaker dinner last night, Tom Dale, Rachel White, and I were talking about this article, this study of how because mostly men are developing VR, they are creating software that sort of has depth perception that is geared more towards how men's brains work, towards women's brain work.
Interesting.
And I would say that maybe like speech recognition is more towards like, doesn't really work for people who like sort of speak higher and faster like women typically do. Are you seeing an improvement like in that as like time goes by? Like I just feel like gender is playing like way too much of a role in these things.
It is, and I mean that's why we have to continue to emphasize it, continue to focus on it, because there's nothing gender specific about that. Anyone who has a graphics background should feel very comfortable doing AR kind of VR work. That's a natural progression from your text. I'm going to take your question though and bend it just a little bit. None of these UIs replace each other. We've got text UIs, and I don't know that that's masculine or feminine. We have graphical UIs, and the old trope is, oh, CSS is for girls and JavaScript is for boys. But that's really not the case. There's nothing gender specific about that. And as we build up a diversity in our interfaces, what we're doing is pulling from everyone's skills and allowing them to contribute where it makes sense. Some of the AR, VR stuff is incredible. I love Google Translate, where you hold up your smartphone. I do a lot of international traveling, so I hold it up to a menu, and the menu is written in German, but it superimposes the English words over it. I love that, but I don't come from a graphic background. I come from a mapping background, but the artistry has already been done, and I'm more interested in the mechanics of getting it there. But there's an earbud I just looked at yesterday. It's called the Dash Pro. And it is an in-ear device that offers in-ear translation. And it's $350, so it's a little bit expensive to get an in-ear translation. But the point I'm trying to make is when I'm traveling, when I go to Japan and sometimes they don't understand me as I'm speaking, if I write it down, they're able to understand me. If I'm able to take my camera and look at a menu, it's able to translate. And if I have that in-ear piece when they're speaking to me, it'll translate on the fly. Those are all aspects of the same problem. And all of these APIs just make our life richer.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned like the price point. I think that is like a huge barrier to accessibility and using these tools, which is why the fact that it's evolving on the web, which is much more portable and cheap, is really great. But there's like a lot of work to do. And in terms of, you were saying these UIs they should not really have like gender involved. Like I noticed you call Siri and Alexa, you keep referring them as her. Like, do you think it's weird that like we're gendering robots? Like, I feel like robots should be speaking like they were in war games. Like, why are we going Uncanny Valley with like talking to these robots.
This is an excellent point, and this is a broader conversation in the industry. I mean, that is reflective. I mean, they've done a number of whoever they are. I can't cite my sources, right? But they have done a number of sources that saying if you're in a GPS and you're getting turn by turns, it is the message is received if it's a woman's voice versus a man's voice. And what's interesting, it's true for both genders. Women are more likely to listen to a woman's voice coming out of a GPS, and men are more likely to come out of it. I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I can't explain why, but it's not an accident, and it's not as sexist as it might seem on the forefront. It's actually based on a lot of scientific studies.
But it is also very gender binary.
It is it is absolutely, yeah. And the good news is, in all of these voices, like I showed you in the combo boxes, you can change the voice. I like my GPS speaking to me with a British accent. And so I love that level of customization. And that is some of the arguments leveled against Siri and Cortana is they don't have that degree of customization. Siri does to a certain degree. You can change those voices, but you're right. Out of the box, she does come with an English accent and a woman's voice.
Yeah, no, it's just, I think that the more we talk about speech recognition and VR and things that tie to human perception, the programming becomes more human. And I know like there are probably people in here that are like, why does she keep talking about gender and stuff like that? But like this is the type of technology where this like super matters, you know what I mean? Like, color tracking and stuff like that is not really related to the human space, but like this is something that is tied to us whether we're technologists or not. So it's just like it's just something that kind of like irks me, but like it's just sort of hopefully something that evolves as it does on the web.
And I think it really poses an opportunity. I mentioned Grace Hopper at the beginning of my presentation. She invented COBOL. Not her, of course, a team of developers, but she's generally recognized as someone that says, we shouldn't be talking to computers in assembly. We should be speaking, or at least typing, in more plain English kinds of things. She was there early days, and so she got to set the standard and set the path for all of us. Not a single person in this room would have a job today if it were for Grace Hopper. And I feel like we're in these early days now, even though these specs are ancient, machine learning is not gender specific. And if that is something that geeks you out, this is the golden opportunity for you to get in early and be the Grace Hopper of speech recognition.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I really applaud companies that are like super diverse as yours is. I do want to note, though, that we are not allowed to call Asian people yellow people.
My apologies.
Yeah, it happens. When you're listening, it happens, but I just wanted to say that out loud. But thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause.